Hey guys, welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name's Larry Casilla from AMMONYC.com. Now, just a few hours ago, we finished the Volvo 240, pulled that thing out of the woods and got it to a new home. As I was driving through, I saw Porsche Warrington, and of course, I needed to charge my car. As we're sitting here sort of hanging out, I got a text message from Jason at Rebuild Rescue asking if we could come down and help him polish his latest acquisition, a TB20. I said, absolutely. So today, on this episode, we're gonna be polishing a plane. Didn't I say that every time? I say, you put a tubie on that thing. While I was waiting for the Taycan to top off its charge, I walked into the dealership to see what's on the floor and to say hi to an old friend of mine, Mark Brenner, who's the GM of both Porsche and Audi of Warrington, PA, and to get a quick tour of their secret collection I heard about.
So yeah, so we just finished.
This looks brand new.
Yeah, so it's brand new. So we opened January 1.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so the e-bike and all that type of crazy stuff. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that cover.
Yeah, so we put those, so like we have customers' cars here being worked on, we'll cover them just because, you know, sometimes like the engine's out of that car, so sometimes people will look and just a little less.
Yeah. Obvious.
Sometimes, yeah. So
that's awesome. I love that cover.
It's cool, isn't it?
I want the car underneath it, but the cover's awesome.
I know. We'll take a new GT3, but the cover's.
Yeah, another one right there.
Yeah, 19 RS.
Oh, a Taycan.
Yeah, Cross Turismo. Yeah.
Oh, look, RS6.
Yeah,
lowered.
that's my RS6.
That's yours?
Yeah. So
like you drove that in this morning?
Well, I'm driving a truck right now, but that's normally my everyday car.
Oh, look at that thing.
Yeah, so you can adjust the suspension through the VAGCOM. So it's just factory, you just lower the parameters. So.
That color is awesome.
Yes, we ordered that car new, olive green. That's dolphin gray, and all of these have.
Oh, what color is that? So that's even nicer.
That's slate gray RAL 7015. So there's only 2 in the world in that color. So there's the Steve McQueen slate gray.
Yeah.
And then there's that slate gray.
And they're for sale or
no? No, none of these are for sale in here.
Who owns them?
The dealership. We own all these cars. So we have a collection. Owner's a good friend of mine, so I buy a lot of these cars and we drive them and play around with them. And
look at this 964.
So this we restored last year. So this is the car in the classic. We have Justin Plasek. You familiar with him?
No.
So he's one of the, I mean, you got to look him up on Instagram, but here, I'll sneak out of your way. But look at this interior. So this is all redone.
Oh my
with
goodness.
Porsche fabric from, you know, from Porsche. Everything's in leather, the custom prototypo wheel.
I just remember driving this one, this particular car. I had a customer say that he was redoing his garage and he needed the car out for a couple of hours and said, hey, could you take this for a ride? And I was like,
yeah, sounds horrible.
Yeah.
No, I'm not available.
And I remember shifting. I brought Mike Musto. I don't know if you know who he is. He's another car guy that's a YouTube guy. So we got in the car and I remember shifting this thing. And every time you would shift, for some reason, it's burned into my memory. It was like somebody was punching you in the back. It's like a very violent, like, race car shift. And I was like, this is the greatest car ever. It's like, because it's empty. Like you hear, like if you hit a rock in there, it's like ding, 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 ding,
like
ding.
If you look inside this car, I mean, there's literally, it's just carbon fiber and metal.
I mean, look at the doors. Like if anything, like when you're driving, you can hear.
That's all you hear.
All that. But the 5-speed, like, is that the only one in the world, do you think, that's like that?
There's about 4 or 5 that have been converted. Because it's, you know, an F1 is a single clutch gearbox. Mm-hmm. So you change the computer over, you add a pedal box and some other miscellaneous stuff. It's not that big of a deal. So, you know, it just is a matter of people wanting to mess around with them. So
every time I see this, I'm like, oh, burn out. When this first came out, I was racing in it's a race called Bull Run, where you go across an R8.
The only thing we have to watch out for here are cows.
And this just came out, and they had an option where the shifter was cleared, you know, like the
So this,
crystal.
I have that. This is upgraded. This is a later Vantage V12 knob. The guy changed it because it's so awkward to touch. It looks like a Transformer's arm.
Yeah, you have the 355 and you have the Stradale. Those are my 2 favorite Ferraris.
And then the 550 Maranello, which you saw in the shop,
yes.
the blue one, that's our 3rd. That 355 we just traded. It's cool because it's green.
Yeah, that is great.
Put a tubie on it, put a major.
Didn't I say that every time? I say, you put a tubie on that thing. I took that when I asked my wife to get married.
Yeah.
I wanted to go ask permission to my father-in-law, blah, blah, blah. I took that exact car in black.
That's awesome.
With a tan interior, with a tubie exhaust from Connecticut all the way down to DC.
Oh, no way.
It was like the greatest, like, wah,
right.
Wah. And so every time I see that, I'm like, you put a tubie on that thing.
Yeah,
it just makes you smile.
So that we trade has 50,000 miles on it. So it's like a beater Ferrari.
This.
So this was black.
Yeah, this is
Full windows out, so it's painted ivory. Did the wheels, the brakes in brown.
Oh, look at the steering wheel.
So retrofitted a 991 GT wheel
look at
with an
that.
airbag. Painted the pole positions, painted the roof rack,
Oh,
custom light pod on the front.
yeah.
But this year, I didn't want to use 993s have ugly steering wheels. So found a retrofit kit and bought
Oh yeah, that's an ugly steering wheel.
ugly steering wheel. So then bought a 991 GT wheel, sent it to him, had him recover everything in leather, painted the insert.
But how'd you get the airbag to work?
It just plugs and plays.
It's literally
it's literally a
same-
plug and play, and it's an adapter. Yeah. So all the gauges are wrapped in leather.
I just figured that like each year would have a different like total wire. Wiring is all wacky.
Yeah, it's a little different, but they were.
Is this ever like driven yet?
No, not yet. Hasn't been on the road.
After my tour of Porsche and the adrenaline rush, I headed out to Chester County Airport to meet up with Harrison and Jake from the Volvo 240 restoration and sale the day earlier.
What's going on, guys?
Yo, what's up?
Long time no see.
Yeah, how you been?
Thanks again for yesterday. That was awesome.
Definitely,
I appreciate that. So, apparently this is the plane.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So what's the story behind this thing?
So we actually, Jason bought this down in Maryland, and it was covered in this stuff. Like just the whole thing was covered in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we ended up actually having to clean this stuff off of the wings and off of the tail, or it would have been pretty dangerous to fly it home.
No kidding.
Yeah, crazy
I never
stuff.
even like imagined that, like the aerodynamics and all that
Yeah.
like come into play. That's cool.
Yeah, so we've gotten it. It's mechanically, it's sound. We gotta get this off, obviously. And
Right.
the paint is just, you look at it, super dull paint. So
I actually think we can potentially get this back. It's basically
Really?
like sort of shaving off all the dead skin, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
right? And underneath is this bright kind of clean. That's what potentially could be if there's enough paint.
Yeah.
So we do need to clean this off first before I can get to it. But if it looks like this, after we kind of scrape this off, we might be able to bring it back. It may look like the rest of these planes too.
dude, that'd be awesome.
That'd be kind of
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, he'd be pumped about that.
How is he doing, by the way?
He's doing good. Yeah. It's still feeling a little under the weather, but definitely on the mend.
Well, let's try to surprise him with a nice clean plane. I think he'll be pretty pumped.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome.
All right, man. Let's do it.
The first step is to test the wing. Now for this, I'm using a wool polishing pad with polish. Now the goal here is just to get a feel for how the paint is reacting underneath the pad and of course through the polisher. In your head, you're thinking to yourself, is the paint feeling sticky or is it really hard? Or maybe is it super thin, that kind of thing. This will help you determine the next few steps and to keep the integrity of the paint intact.
Okay, so right off the bat, I did a test with a wool pad and some polish. And you can see on the paint depth gauge, we're at about 3.3. Now the area that I just polished, 1.68, meaning I took about a mil off. What that means is that's a mil of dead paint. So there's a lot of heavy, dead, dried out, oxidized, however you want to describe it, paint. And it's looking pretty good, but the challenge here is it's so thin, I can't necessarily get underneath all of the oxidation to sort of reveal the really awesome paint that's on the rest of these here. So we have to kind of be a little bit cautious because if I go too deep, I can go right through and then we don't have any paint at all. So this is one of those times where you have to know when to say when. This is a perfect example. So I want to keep going and keep playing with the paint, but if I go too deep, we're gonna have some problems.
After the initial polishing, you can see that the reflection is way better, but it's obviously far from great. And at this point in the process, this is as deep as I feel that I can go without removing all the paint and just leaving bare metal. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. So at this point, the best I can do is just kind of clean up the first few layers of dead skin and then clean out the other ones that are a bit deeper from all the dirt, and it'll look better, but not super shiny. Much the same concept as working on an older car, we are limited by the amount of paint you have to work with. And as a detailer, you have to recognize and respect your limiting factors, such as the depth of the paint, or you're gonna have to have an expensive repaint on your hands. As both Jake and I were becoming more comfortable on each side, I decided to try another approach, which is to use sandpaper for the mow down technique for two reasons. First, it can be safer because you're introducing less heat into the material and it cuts a bit cleaner and definitely faster. But second, a more practical reason is that by sanding first, it actually makes your pad cleaning less frequent later on, especially because we don't have a big compressor on hand. After the quick mow down sanding to remove the dead layers, polishing was way easier. As you can see the difference in gloss, which translates to less drag, better speed, and of course, less fuel consumption for the plane.
Okay, at this point, I've polished the wing there, and the goal with this entire project is to do two things. One is to sort of remove all the lichen and make it safe to fly. When there's little dots and little imperfections on it, obviously it's going to cause drag, it cause some issues for the pilots, etc. The second thing is we want to minimize the amount of repaint that Jason potentially needs to do. I can tell you right now, the wing needs to be repainted. That's very obvious. There's bolts hanging out, that kind of thing. But up here, we may be able to save his bill a little bit. If you look, the before and after is huge. Why? There's a lot of paint here. If there's a lot of paint, I can actually polish it. Over there, because it's so thin, I don't really have a whole lot more to go because I'll just go right down to the metal, and obviously we don't do that. So that's a time when you say, okay, when is when? That's when. Over here, we might be able to save maybe this part going north up here. I might be able to save this so he doesn't have to necessarily repaint it. That's kind of the goal here. Because he did in fact actually fly it, which is amazing, we do want to make this as safe as possible.
Now, when I moved to the fuselage of the plane, it was totally different paint because there was a cover on it. Look at the numbers on the side and the blue stripe. Absolutely popped out perfect. Here's why.
Okay, after a few hours of polishing, as you can see, I'm a hot mess over here. There's a huge difference between the wing and the fuselage here. So I'm gonna draw something, as I always do. I gotta get a little bit nerdy here, but as you can see, it's coming out really well. This is what I was expecting for the wing, but what makes it interesting compared to cars is a lot of people have already texted me and saying like, why is this not working, that kind of thing. So right off the bat, let's just pretend this is a car. And let's just say that this is 6 mil, right? So when you get fading, just like it's happening here, you can see it's all faded just like it is on the wing. And it comes down, let's say you go to about here, and all of this here is faded and oxidized. So I come in and I polish, and I bring this all the way down to here, and what do you have? You have beautiful paint underneath here, and it shines like you're seeing right here. Now what I just learned is this is covered. I didn't know that, but when they got this plane, from the woods or wherever, this actually had a cover on it, so it didn't absorb the sun. It didn't have a whole lot of degradation like the wings did, so that's why I'm having some trouble. Now, if you come onto a plane, so if this is a car, if I come onto a plane, right, you have the same thing. Here's the top. Now, this is the bottom, because now you have 6 mil. The plane is really only 2 mil. Why? They put less paint on there because if you've ever held a 5-gallon container of paint, it weighs a lot. Obviously, a plane, everything's concerned about weight. So you're saving a whole lot of weight by putting less paint on the plane. So in this case, you have the same thing. The sun is still affecting it, still degrading it, discoloring it, and sort of just dying on the vine, so to speak. So if I come in here and try to scoop this up and scoop this up, you don't have anything left. That's what I'm seeing over there. That's why I can't get any shine out of it. There's nothing left other than metal. Here, because it's been protected, I have a little bit more. It's faded to about here-ish, if that makes sense. So now I'm taking this much off, and now this area looks really shiny. That's why this looks shiny. So that's what's going on behind the scenes. We have to finish the rest of this, and I think I'm going to save him a decent amount of money because I don't think this area needs to be painted, but all the wings, all the structure definitely needs to be repainted.
While I was working on the nose, Jake was up on the ladder cleaning the tail, which was also uncovered and in really rough shape. For the lichen on the nose, I tried 2 techniques. First, I was using a very old, what I call a throwaway pad to chew up all the junk, sort of like a scrub pad that you're just about to toss in the garbage. This worked pretty well, but then I said, hey, let's switch to a blue microfiber cutting pad. Again, it's going to cut more than the wool just to see if it's going to work any better. It did, of course, but the downside is it actually fills up faster and requires more frequent blowouts. The second idea was just to pour water on the lichen and get it softened up first, then try the microfiber cutting pad. Again, for the record, this is just a throwaway pad that I save after larger jobs so I can work on dirty polishing things like this, and it actually worked pretty good. After a decent amount of time on one side with the polisher, I tried something completely different. I did water, a disc scrubber on the green side, and a bit of degreaser. And this worked a whole lot easier, but the downside is it was tough on your arm. It did scratch the surface, and it doesn't leave it polished afterwards like the pad does. But again, each technique has its pluses and minuses. Pick the one that works best for you. In this case, I probably would have started with the scrubber on the other side. It was a little bit easier. Next, I cleaned up the props and the nose cone with another throwaway pad, making the surface smoother as it cuts through the air. The difference, again, was night and day. When we finished up for the day and pushed her outside, I noticed the blue matches the Taycan color perfectly in the background. And overall, she looks significantly better than before. And just aside from the aesthetics, it is a safer plane to fly, of course, without the lichen on it, the extra layers of dead heavy paint, and now with a far smoother aerodynamic surface. What is that? Oh my gosh, you can make that thing totally chromed out. You'd be black by the end of it, like all the, you know, all the stuff hitting up.
Oh yeah, it would look awesome though.
Can you imagine that thing curling over, like, like if it hit the sun, it would like blind you.
Blinding.
Yeah. All right, no more planes for today, please. We're done. We've hit our quota of planes. Well, guys, there you have it. The Trinidad TB20 is done, and it looks much, much better, but there's some room to grow. The thing that we learned today, at least for me on this episode, is when you're working on something like a wing that's been exposed for many years, you really don't have enough meat to go underneath all the way and sort of pull out that cavity. You have to be conscious of that. Something like the cockpit here or the fuselage, that had a cover on it, so the sun didn't sort of degrade that so much, and there was a lot of room left so that I could scoop it out, and there's still life left. As you can see, the fuselage looks much better than the wing. So that's kind of the lesson that I took away from today. Super fun as always. Big thank you to Rebuild Rescue and Jason and the team. Harrison, Jake, it was super fun. As always, guys, if you have any questions, you know where to find me. Larry at AMMONYC.com. See you next week.
W123 Coupe, that's the chassis code. It's a 300 CD non-turbo. Many of these that have made it over 1 million miles.
Really?
Yeah, original head gaskets.
How many miles are on this?
This has under 100,000. Yeah. This is a pretty rare bird here.